even though there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of noise, fundamentally, applicants' job is exactly the same as it was.
We always have to think about what are business schools really looking for. At the end of the day, what makes for a successful essay? It's specificity, authenticity. You can never pull that out of ChatGPT.
I think deferred programs are going to start becoming more competitive than ever before.
What I'm seeing a lot more of is people who are planning on applying to deferred applications 2 or 3 years from now. And they're doing really long-term planning. And I think maybe it is that they're starting college, they're in their 2nd or 3rd year of college, they're suddenly realizing the real world is coming. And they're like, oh, things have been pretty uncertain. And a lot of stuff we talked about at the beginning. How do I hedge my bets? How do I give a little more certainty in an uncertain world?
(2025-2026) application year has really been, quite a wild ride.
It was a wild ride before the season even began.
It was a very wild ride at the beginning.
That's true. Take it back. 2025 running into 2025-2026 application season was quite the wild.
Well, yeah. I mean, can I just actually lay it out for everyone? So you have applicants out there. They're worrying with their jobs. They're doing all the things that are in their world. Obviously, they're aware of macro conditions, but we're micro aware of what's going on here. And so, January, February, March, the season is humming along. Everything is, we're getting more consultations than ever. Everything is roses. And then all of a sudden, the tariffs started. This is even before the attacks on the schools, I think. The tariff conversation starts, which almost sinks the bond market. The stock market drops, and everyone just freezes for 6 weeks until we figure that out. Meantime, you have all of the I guess April, because I remember where I was on a family vacation when there was the first major threat of not allowing any students to enter and not extending any visas. And that, again, was just a shockwave. And so, yeah, this is totally unprecedented.
Right. And I just want to layer on one more thing, which was the absolute uncertainty. We ourselves were watching day to day to see what was happening, and it was changing day to day.
And let's add into it that there was also political unrest and protests on campuses, and people didn't know how other certain people would be viewed and if they were even safe on campuses. And parents were getting scared about sending their kids to school. And so everything was just uncertain.
And even with the visa issue, it's there were people who had finished their first year or were about to finish their first year, worried about their second year even. So it's you had, micro on a micro basis, you had people who were in these schools talking to people at home. And, so there's just so much uncertainty. And even then, since then, you've still seen the president of UVA resign. Today, the president of Northwestern resigned. Yesterday, Harvard won an appeal with, to get some of their funding back. So
Columbia's been through 3 presidents this year.
That's right. 2 of them interim.
These things aren't necessarily directly affecting MBA admissions, but there's just this story and this energy is kind of up and down. But I also think that it's there's a lot of anxiety for sure. But I think a lot of things, people are almost the anxiety is the new normal, and people are starting to just kind of accept that in the back of their head, international students matriculated. The schools are open. The funding, unfortunately affects mostly PhD students. Doesn't really affect business school as much. And we definitely started to see a recovery in the second.
And schools also, at one point, they were saying, we have no idea how we're going to handle this. And then they started coming out with solutions if the visas didn't come through. Now, that didn't really happen, but they had backup plans that weren't terrible. I mean, remote is bad, but Harvard said they were going to have, I think either in Canada or London, a international section. So
a bunch of, I think 4 or 5 different, Singapore, London,
which is actually,
maybe Toronto.
It's not the ideal solution, but you still get live classes and with the professors and you get to meet classmates. It's not the worst solution. And things just started to feel oh, it's kind of like when COVID hit, right? No one knew at first, and then schools figured out how to manage it.
That's right. And I will have to say one thing. It was a very close call. I don't know about you, but I just had a client get his visa right now. And I know Rachel, very similarly, she was talking
Johnny
about this
had one
person.
too. Who just got
and what it does to people's lives, it's so crazy. And I think obviously we lose a lot when we're looking at the numbers, but people's lives who left their jobs and things, it's just really so unfortunate. But as we sit right now today, things seem to be to some degree snapping back into place.
Yeah, I mean, to give a sense of it again, like we had, I think our measure is like, of the market is our consultation volumes. And we just had a very, very busy June, July. So like, after like maybe a quieter April, May, people sort of got used to the new normal. Like, okay, I'll proceed with my plans. I just needed to kind of like feel like things were going to be a little bit, maybe not normal, but close enough to normal that I could exist. If you want to be one of our success stories, sign up for a free consultation with a member of our full-time MBA admissions team. Since we've worked with tens of thousands of applicants over the past 2 decades, we can give you our honest opinion on your chances and help you put together your very best application. That is not a sales call, but rather your first session with one of us for free. We can give you a profile evaluation, answer specific questions about the process, review your resume, talk about your school choices, and so much more. Sign up at mbaMission.com/consult. We look forward to working with you.
But what we are seeing is strategies for applications have changed a little bit. The number of people who are adding European schools or Canadian schools is escalating because everybody wants a backup. It's not their ideal, but I think that those schools, which often have been seen as outstanding schools that are a little bit safer for people to apply to, I'm very curious to see what happens with their volume because I don't think those are going to be safer schools this year. I think the application volume is going up. And if everything settles down and someone gets into their top U.S. school, it won't affect those schools. But I bet the application volume is soaring.
At INSEAD and LBS in particular, I would imagine it's soaring.
Yeah, that's right.
And like Oxford, Cambridge probably too, on a relative basis for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Great schools on their own, but you're absolutely right in the sense of now they could be a great fit for folks who potentially look at visa issues, or more specifically, those are really not bad options for them, particularly if they come from Southeast Asia. The notion of being in England, there's some real opportunity there. When I talk to clients now, when I do my consults now, and you're right, volume has recently really risen, I say you have to zig where other people zag. Yeah. Right now, if there's uncertainty in terms of that's holding people back from applying, I'm like, perfect. Now is the time, exactly the right time for you.
What I've been saying to them, though, is there's a lot of noise. But none of it matters because until you get into school, the noise is irrelevant. So your job as an applicant has not changed. Your job is write the best application you possibly can, the best recommendations, the highest test score, whatever you can do. Maybe you vary your school choice a little bit. Maybe you add some European schools or do a wider number of schools. But your job is to get into school. Once you're in, you now have the school on your side. And if you're not in, the school's not advocating for you. Right. So even though there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of noise, fundamentally, applicant's job is exactly the same as it was.
You are gaining option value by applying now. You don't have to go. Right. Like, I think you'll probably want to go. It'd be deeply disappointing if you went through that process and chose not to. But like, exactly what Harold said. That's what I say to people who are still uncertain about going to school in the States, obviously in particular, is, hey, you can apply in a year that has, reduced, less competition for you. And you could end up at a school potentially where, might have been harder for you in past years. And like, yeah, it's not a fun reality. I think this is unrealistic because I think the peak of this has passed. But if there are international issues, the school will be on your side. And if you just feel like the environment's too hostile, then you choose not to go. But
But until you get in, none of that matters.
That's right. And it really is not every school. I hate to say that, but the schools in the U.S. that have been targeted are really the very top. Harvard in particular, that's what you hear most about. Wharton, yes. Columbia, yes. Yeah. University of Texas, great school.
Northwestern.
No. Yeah, Northwestern has been targeted. UCLA, no.
Yeah. MIT seems to have escaped a lot of.
They have. They seem to have
Darden,
escaped.
Duke.
Who knows how?
Right. Who knows how? Who knows for how long? Yeah.
Yeah. So the visa story is definitely one of the stories. I did hear from one admissions officer that her applicant, and this is within can't give too many identifiers, but top 15 program, let's say, to make it vague enough, that their application volume is down fairly considerably.
Say if it was international, right? What about U.S. volume?
I don't recall actually off the top of my head. I think she said about flat domestically, but down significantly internationally. I think the other piece of the story is how they have to react to this new environment, right? So gone are a lot of schools' diversity essays, and I've heard from admissions directors who I've spoken with who maybe I'm saying this in too cheeky a way, but are basically like, we're making decisions with the Justice Department in the admissions office with us. Like, yes, they're not literally there, right, but they are. Some of them are afraid of being sued personally. They're afraid of showing any bias, accidental or other, like not even intentionally, just accidentally. And the one or two that I've spoken with are sanitizing their data to make sure that they're like, they don't know whether they have a he or a she or they. They don't know whether they have what ethnicity, background anyone is.
So it's interesting because there's actually two competing trends then, which is on one hand there's the advent of AI, which is could make schools veer away from essays because they don't want these written essays and towards videos. But then you have the other trend of diversity and DEI issues, which could make admissions offices veer away from doing videos.
Like audio interviews.
And then but audio also has the issues. So it's a really interesting confluence. We haven't seen a ton of change yet in the applications. Maybe, I think there's one or two schools that have dropped the essays in favor of videos. Maybe a couple schools have more videos, but we haven't seen a major change, which I think we were expecting to see more of because of AI, because this is competing.
Jessica, I'm going to feedback something to you, which I think is very relevant here, which is, but a candidate's job has not changed.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, you have to be authentic. You have to really be specific about what your goals are. You have to be very specific about who you are.
About your fit with the school, about your accomplishments, everything we talk about in all of these podcasts, your job hasn't changed.
But we're hearing from applicants, Forte used to be a real force in the space, the consortium. You have schools leaving the consortium because they don't want to be seen to be trying to be diverse, like because of the Justice Department, right? So you have 4 or 5 schools leaving the consortium. For those who don't know, it's the CGSM, the Consortium for Graduate School and Management, a group that has led the charge to bring more diverse applicants, particularly African American and Hispanic applicants, although also champions of diversity of any background, ethnicity, race, nationality, whatever it might be, into the MBA world. Probably about 20 partner schools. Several of them left. Same thing with Forte, which brings women into the environment, into the business environment. Several schools left Forte, and they're not leaving because they don't believe in Forte's mission or have lost confidence in Forte's management. They're leaving because they don't want to be in the crosshairs of the Justice Department. But now we're getting applicants. I'm at least getting some consultations, and I should note that the people in this room do work with clients. We've talked about this before. Yes. Sometimes people are like, oh, I'd like to work with Harold, but he does the podcast. Like, no, you also work with clients. Jessica is a legend who works with clients as well. They're asking us, like, is it a disadvantage to apply through the consortium or the Forte? If I identify as a woman, as I identify with as a champion of diversity, is that actually problematic?
Right. And Harold and I heard today an anecdote from someone who said that the Women in Business Club at a particular business school, the head of it was called into the business school's office and said, you might have to change your mission because we can't be women focused, which seems like the whole purpose of the club. And I don't think anything happened with it.
This is not an applicant group. This is this is a student at
That's
business
right.
school,
That's right. That's right.
Like someone who's there, they couldn't even at a business school promote women in business. Like,
who are already there. Yeah.
Oh, so let's talk a little bit more about AI. For a few different reasons. First of all, that's what we get a huge number of questions about. But also now some of those questions actually live in applications. Harvard Business School is asking very directly, how have you used AI? Wharton has something not quite as direct, but they're certainly getting at that point. And other schools, even if they don't ask that question, are certainly thinking about it.
Just to point it out, Harvard's question is, did you use AI? And if so, how? We advise you to answer honestly, but honest should include that you wrote the essays yourself because you did, presumably, and if you use AI, your essays are not going to be as strong. Wharton, I actually like a lot of what Wharton says, which is AI is a tool, just like spell check is a tool, and we assume that you're using it, but we also are assuming that AI isn't writing your essays, and since you have to sign an integrity statement, you're agreeing with that. So I think that's, the AI is obviously a much bigger issue that we've talked about in many contexts, but I think the reality is AI will make your essays worse, not better.
But I think So yes, there's the practical component, which is if you are starting with a crowdsourced foundation that, it's going to be hard to get to a level of like really authentic creativity. Or if you get there, then you may as well skip the crowdsourced foundation because you had it in you in the first place. Yeah. But forgetting the practical side, the ethical side of them asking and your response and what it means to say to them, like, okay, so if Harvard's asking you, they're not spelling out any particular punishment. They are not saying you're inadmissible. Right. And so this is something that might be a little bit of a not the type of thing you expect three experts, or I'll speak for myself, one expert to say on a podcast. But the answer is, we don't know how they're going to treat you. They're not sharing that. And so they're like disclosure. It's like, are they going to punish the innocent person who says, theoretically, like, yeah, I used AI to sharpen some of the bullet points in my resume, to reduce word count in my essays to get me a little closer. It's like, is that worse than saying, I didn't use it when you did? So we just don't know what they're doing with this information at this point. Now, we believe anyone who's working with us, we're going to say to them, listen, we're going to get there. We're going to get there with a lot of authenticity. If you do the hard work, we're going to get a great output. And so we'd encourage you not to have to be in a position where you have to answer that question. But also, I'm not naive in saying, like, I have one client who I love who's so authentic and sincere and it writes so thoughtfully and beautifully. But I did have to ask this question with him to discuss this with him because I knew he had to answer it. And so I said, I've got to ask you, have you used it? And he said, yeah, here and there, I'd be like, I would put a sentence in just to like kind of punch it up, or I couldn't quite get what I wanted to do, but like, I'm not worried about saying that I own this.
Right.
Like, okay, great.
Right. You reminded me of an analogy. The schools all have a question that says, did you ever have an honor code violation? Did you have a DUI or anything? And I remember talking to a client once, it was actually a consult who ended up working with me, and he said, I have to answer yes to the honor code violation because it's on my transcript, but should I even bother applying? And I said, let's look at the application. What does it say after, you select yes for that? What happens next? And he said, well, it says, please explain. I said, okay. And then what's the next thing? He said, work experience, activity list. I said, oh, wait, so it doesn't say stop here and do not submit? He's like, no. I'm like, then they're not cutting you off. So it's the same thing. Obviously, a DUI is very different from using AI, even though, I'm using it as an analogy, but they're not saying, if you do this, you're wrong. They're saying, give us information and context.
Yeah. Let me just put it in parentheses here. We as a firm, Jessica, myself, obviously some of the other consultants, any one of which you can give us a call or sign up for a free 30-minute consultation or work with us directly. We sometimes try out some of those ChatGPT or AI detectors. And I have to be honest with you, I never use AI. I go back to some essays that I helped folks write 2-3 years ago when AI didn't even exist. I'll send them through some of those detectors, and it believes it was written by AI.
Right.
So,
right. The detectors are so unreliable, and it's scary. I asked my clients to run theirs through a detector just to see if there are red flags at the end. But we don't really know, since my clients generally are not using AI, and I can tell that it's an information thing. But we know that those AI detectors are so unreliable, especially schools that are using proprietary ones.
So what's funny about your examples, I actually sort of have the inverse of that. So I do a fair amount of pro bono work. I worked with an amazing HBS applicant who wrote one of her essays largely about mentoring this young woman. And when this individual got into HBS, I said to her, please let me help this woman with her Common App application. And so a couple of years later, she came to me. We wrote something. This young woman is so amazing. And I'm very proud of what she did. And I thought to myself, okay, well, let's see what I can do with some of these prompts and like with some of these facts. If I feed some of these facts into ChatGPT, what would it produce? So I started to share I created something sort of parallel to her. I didn't share her details, but change her gender and change some of the locations, whatever, but fed in all sorts of details that would be good analogs. And I was like, okay, this actually isn't that bad a starting point. And then I realized I gave it a ton of very specific information.
That's right.
And I was like, of course it's not a bad starting point, because I took the end point. Right. If I would have taken the starting point, we wouldn't have gotten there. But I took all of these. So basically, I took something that I was like, whoa, that gave other people shivers, and turned it into something that was like an okay starting point.
Right. But you didn't need it because you had already done all that pre-work.
Right, exactly.
Do you remember when AI first really started making waves, maybe a year ago, you presented at one of our staff meetings a sample essay as if that was written by AI. Right. And we all could identify instantly how generic it was, how cliched. And so if you are investing so much of your energy and time, you as applicants, into getting into a school, why would you lead with something generic? Why would you use a tool that takes away what makes you special?
Right. That's right. And we always have to think about, what are business schools really looking for? At the end of the day, what makes for a successful essay? It's specificity, authenticity. You can never pull that out of ChatGPT.
Right. If the school only was going to do a checkoff of your grades, your scores, where you went to school, and how many promotions you had, there wouldn't be essays. Right. We wouldn't have jobs.
So we beat the drum on not using AI enough here, I think, or especially when working with us to rely on expertise. But I think one aspect of AI that, sort of a more macroeconomic aspect of it is, I think it's creating uncertainty, because there are a whole bunch of studies that have come out that said, entry-level jobs are beginning to disappear.
That's right.
And I think what this is going to do is it's going to create a lot of anxiety with college applicants and with college students and with their parents, who are going to encourage them to apply for deferred programs. So I think deferred programs are going to start becoming more competitive than ever before. I think we're going to see deferred numbers surge. People are applying to the HBS 2+2 program. Virtually every one of the top 15 programs has a deferred application, because that way people can say, okay, you need to have a job or by and large, you need to have a job to be successful in the deferred world. So it doesn't mean you don't need a job. You just have a business school waiting for you. But it's certainly in a world where you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen with my entry-level job. There might be fewer of them. Maybe it doesn't go away, but there might be fewer of them. I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. You're like, it's good to have MIT waiting in the wings.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's going to become a much more competitive process.
Right. Or even a bigger picture here, MBAs have just become more important.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, AI, artificial intelligence, there still needs to be natural smarts. And that's what MBA is.
And this is obviously anecdotal, but when I think about my consultations in the last couple of months, I would say that I am seeing slightly more deferred, but what I'm seeing a lot more of is people who are planning on applying to deferred applications 2 or 3 years from now. And they're doing really long-term planning. And I think maybe it is that they're starting college, they're in their second or third year of college, they're suddenly realizing the real world is coming, and they're like, oh, things have been pretty uncertain. And a lot of stuff we talked about at the beginning. How do I hedge my bets? How do I give a little more certainty in an uncertain world?
Right. And by the way, I think this is true not just of deferred applicants. I think this is going to be true of med school. Like med school seeing a dramatic surge in interest. I think possibly even people are just being litigators. There's not going to be a world where AI can argue in front of maybe elementary contracts, but certainly not something sophisticated or important. Maybe you can get to write some basic NDA or something like that. But I think anything important is you're going to want a human being doing. But if Harold, you're not a murderer, but if you were on trial for murder, would you want AI representing?
You can't prove anything.
Yeah, exactly. Would you want AI representing you, or you want a sophisticated human being out there?
Yeah,
human beings.
Well, and it's similar. I mean, not that this is not a plug, but when you think about us working with us, that when you work with us, you have a full-time consultant who is hands-on, getting to know you, getting to know your story. Whereas there are firms out there where you just tell them your story and they plug and play into a generic essay, or they do. I call them the cookie cutter ones, or the checklist ones. They're going through a checklist and saying, yes, you're good here, you're not good here. Yeah. It's not delving into your story. I
just want to stick with the macro instead of the micro, but I think that generally speaking, I agree with what you're saying about grad school probably actually increasing in importance. There are two narratives. Maybe college is less important and some colleges go away. I kind of actually believe that too. I believe that for some people, I think the trades are going to see a surge in North America and a new respect, and I think that college is not going to be an article of faith. But I think if you are in the college pipeline, I think you are probably also more likely to be in the graduate school pipeline going forward.
Well, Harold and I both have kids in college age dealing with exactly this topic now. And yes, it's a big issue.
Well, listen, I'm going to look at it slightly differently, which is in the world of AI, how colleges teach has to be fundamentally different. With this notion here, it has to be much more of a human process. This idea here of, 200, 300 per person lecture hall, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't make any sense because AI can do it. Similarly, though, and then we're starting to see this, the applications reflect that fact. In actual fact, applications today, there's more video than there's ever before. There's more short answers. There's more questions that are actually far more nuanced and far more personal. And we are already seeing that now. I mean, Jessica, 3 years ago, did we see as many videos as there are now? What school doesn't have a video?
Or also, like Harvard had a big amorphous, Harvard Business School had a big amorphous prompt. Yeah, it was just like it could go on as long as you want for a period, and then finally they moved it to 900 words. But they were just probably just like, we're getting junk. We can't deal with this.
Right. And AI would do a nightmare with that.
AI would do a nightmare.
They want to get away from the
But
AI.
now we're also seeing, I think, a trend in multi-part questions. You think about Kellogg's essays or even Harvard's essays.
Right, like
they're
super
multiple
detailed,
parts.
tight, compact.
Right. And we always have to check with our clients, like, are you answering every single part? These schools put a lot of thought. I mean, if you look at Harvard's essays this year versus last year, they're essentially the same, but they're not exactly the same. They made some very specific word choices. And so our clients have to respect that. And if you just toss it into AI, they may not be as specific about answering every single part of those questions.
I think one other thing that we should talk about, it's the pair to the initial conversation, whereas if international applicants are lower this year and this is your year, generally speaking, these things even out. And so, next year might be a bit of a recovery for international applicants, and the year after might be a bit of a surge, or next year it might recover already. And so you're probably moving into a more competitive, you're definitely moving into a more competitive environment. The shock this year was so close to the application season. But I think next year, this is a 2025, 2026 topic right now for this video. I'm moving into 26, 27 now. I think a more competitive year for international applicants. I can't speculate at this point on, I could speculate. I'm not going to speculate on where the economy is going. Generally speaking, when the economy wavers, people go back to school. There are some signs of unemployment rising. There are some signs of, bubble mentality in the market right now. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't reached quite a fever pitch yet. This could be a year like no other, and that's to the advantage of
listen, that's what I'm telling. That's what I'm telling everyone I speak to. Yeah, that's what I'm telling to everyone that I speak to. It's like, at this point, apply. Gain that option.
Yeah.
Why not?
Like if we look at, I always use Harvard Business School as a bellwether for 20 years of me doing this, until COVID. It basically, Harvard had between 9,300 and 10,000 applicants for 950 students, give or take. And for 2 years after COVID, when the job market was really secure for young people were working from home and loving it. Maybe that work from home story is another thing, because a lot of people are being called back to the office now. It seems like every day there's another, and people don't want to be called back to the office. So I think some people are like, I'd rather go to school and have more freedom than be called back to the office. But for 2 years post-COVID, when young people had all the power shifted towards young people, application volumes at Harvard felt, I think, 8,700 and then 8,200, like unprecedented lows in my 20-year career, never dipping below 9,000 ever. I think the lowest might have been 9,200. And so, they then quickly rebounded last year. And the year after, they were back in the 9,000s. It's funny, there are a lot of articles written about how applications are booming. I'm like, applications are not booming. They're returning to the mean. Anyone saying they're booming is trying to fearmonger and get you to buy their services. They were returning to the mean, and I think they'll probably revert to the mean again next year, or the higher end of the mean. Like, as silly as that is, because that definitionally doesn't work. But
I think that's fair.
Right. And that also reflects in the main hirers or the key hirers here. Right. It's like right now, consulting, investment banking, they're notorious for overhiring and then overfiring. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day now, if they are hiring much fewer than are anticipated. There is a return to the mean a couple of years out, and at the end of the day, this could be the perfect time to apply because maybe your chances up a little bit, but then also when it comes time to find a job, maybe your chances are up as well.
But the bottom line is, if you don't apply,
That's right. That's right. Listen, I'm all about optionality. When somebody calls me for one of our free 30-minute consults, I say to them, it's all about optionality. If you want to go to business school, then apply. And then at that point, you can decide what you want to do. Deciding to apply, deciding to go, two fundamentally different decisions.
Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining.
Okay, perfect. Jeremy, thank you very much for being my co-host today.
Yes, thank you for having me as your permanent guest co-host, semi-permanent guest host. Yeah, great.
it's fun to hang with you guys.
Yeah, and Jessica, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Exciting news! You can now access On Track by mbaMission for free. Take our 2-minute onboarding questionnaire to personalize your learning path. Choose the free plan, and you'll have unlimited access to our complete modules on MBA application timelines, standardized testing, your professional background, community leadership, school selection, and more. You'll also get access to select lessons from our brainstorming, personal statement, essay, resume, and recommendation modules. It's a great introduction to the On Track platform and will help you jumpstart the MBA application process. Get started today at ontrack.mbamission.com.